You sat through them every Saturday. Cereal, pajamas, half asleep. You loved every minute. And not once did anyone tell you what those cartoons were actually for. One was selling cigarettes to children. One ended with two characters sitting on a train track. One hid the bodies on purpose. One was a toy company killing off its own hero to move stock. The Saturday morning so many people remember was never quite the show it was pretending to be. Even Bugs Bunny got drafted into the war. In April 1944, Warner Brothers released a Bugs Bunny cartoon called Bugs Bunny Nips the Nips. The title was a double meaning. The verb nip meant to bite. The word nip was also an American slur for a Japanese person. In the cartoon, Bugs is stranded on a Pacific island full of Japanese soldiers, and he kills them.
Oh, your eyes, your lips, you're beautiful.
He hands out grenades disguised as ice cream cones. He uses slurs on camera. He calls them monkey faces. He gives one of them a hand grenade and says on screen, "Here, slant eyes." This is Bugs Bunny, the wisecracking rabbit America had raised millions of children on, doing wartime propaganda against an enemy whose grandchildren would grow up to watch his cartoons. It was not the only one. Warner Brothers made roughly a dozen wartime shorts in this vein, featuring Bugs, Daffy, and others mocking Japanese and German enemies. After the war ended, the studio quietly pulled most of them. Today, you cannot legally watch Bugs Bunny Nips the Nips on any major streaming platform or television channel. Warner Brothers has kept it locked away since 1993.
Tell me more about my eyes. Hey, now, wait a minute, sister. Now, take it easy. You got me wrong. Just a passing fancy.
A generation of kids grew up loving Bugs Bunny. They never met the wartime version of him. Their parents made sure of that.
And the rabbit he was looking for was the most famous of all characters, Bugs Bunny.
Hey, thanks very much, Doc. I'm glad you like him, too.
This show sold what kids were too young to buy. The Flintstones premiered on September 30th, 1960, the first animated primetime series in television history. For decades afterward, in endless reruns, it became a Saturday morning fixture for generation after generation of American kids. But its first two seasons were sponsored by Winston Cigarettes, a brand owned by R.J. Reynolds. Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble appeared in their own black and white commercials, lighting up and singing the jingle, and most early episodes closed on the two of them taking a smoke break. Cigarette ads weren't even banned from American television until 1971.
Filter Blend makes the big taste difference, and only Winston has it, up front where it counts. Here, ahead of the pure white.
Until then, the most wholesome cartoon family in the country was, at the end of every show, a tobacco commercial. When the Flintstones had a baby in the third season, two things happened. The sponsor quietly switched from Winston to Welch's grape juice because the audience was skewing younger. And the baby itself was changed from a boy to a girl on the advice of the marketing department for a blunt reason. Girl dolls sold better than boy dolls. There is one more thing.
Make yourself comfortable, dear. Dinner will be ready in a few minutes.
The Flintstones was more or less a copy of The Honeymooners, Jackie Gleason's hit sitcom. A loudmouth working-class husband, his patient wife, the dim neighbor next door, the lodge meetings. Gleason knew it. His lawyers told him he could probably win a lawsuit.
It was called the Flagstones at that time. And they said, you're going to be the character. And so it was Dawes Butler and I who did the pilot.
He decided against it. As the story goes, one of his own lawyers asked him whether he really wanted to be remembered as the man who yanked Fred Flintstone off the air, away from all those kids. So the most beloved family in cartoon history stayed on the air, an advertising vehicle, wearing a copy of someone else's show. How this one ended on a train track. In November 1956, MGM released a Tom and Jerry short called Blue Cat Blues. For the only time in the series, the silent mouse Jerry narrates, looking back to explain how things got this bad. Tom has fallen in love. He spends everything he has trying to win a beautiful cat, only to lose her to a wealthier rival named Butch, who simply outspends him at every turn until Tom has nothing left.
When the jewelry failed to impress her, he signed away his life to buy a car. 312 monthly payments at 112% interest.
The cartoon opens on what the rest of it explains. Tom, heartbroken and ruined, sitting on a set of railroad tracks waiting for a train. Jerry, watching, thinks at least he still has his own girl, and then sees her drive past in another mouse's car under a just married banner. Jerry climbs onto the tracks and sits down beside his enemy. The whistle of the approaching train grows louder, and the short fades to black before anything happens. For decades, a myth has followed this cartoon, that it was the final Tom and Jerry, that it was banned. Neither is true. Tom and Jerry were back, alive and chasing each other the very next month. But the ending itself is exactly as dark as it sounds. A cartoon famous for slapstick and anvils quietly closed on two characters giving up on life. The studio that built its name making children laugh made one short that no one was supposed to laugh at, and then never spoke of it again. In 1967, an American voice actor named Peter Fernandez bought the rights to a Japanese cartoon called Mach Go Go Go. He renamed it Speed Racer, dubbed most of the voices himself, wrote the English script, and put it on American television.
My name's Peter Fernandez, and I've been in show business and a writer and a director.
It became the first major anime to air on US screens.
I'm going to forget about driving on a team.
What?
Nothing, Pops.
Maybe I'm wrong about rebuilding the Mach 5. Maybe it would be a failure.
And it also might turn out to be the best racing car in the world.
There were problems. The original Japanese show was violent. Gunfights, racetrack deaths, real peril for the young hero. American children's television did not allow that. The dub softened where it could and cut where it could not. Then there was the mouths. Japanese animation moves the lips faster than English language dialogue can fit. To match the words to the on-screen mouths, Fernandez wrote the dialogue at breakneck speed.
The Mach 5 is the most complex and ingenious car ever built. A tribute to my father's imagination, genius, and technical skill.
Every line crammed into half its natural length. That breakneck pace, which Americans came to think of as the distinctive style of anime dubbing, was never a style at all. It was a technical workaround. The first generation of American kids to fall in love with anime fell in love with an accident.
Gee, Pops, maybe you shouldn't have quit your factory job.
I wouldn't have if they'd let me rebuild the car.
Why didn't they give you the go-ahead after all the work you put into the plan?
They were watching a violent show with the blood cleaned up, narrated by one man pretending to be a dozen, all of them talking too fast because the mouths required it. ABC's Schoolhouse Rock ran on Saturday mornings from 1973 to 1985. It won 4 Emmys. It taught a generation grammar, multiplication, the human body, and how a bill becomes a law. To a lot of Americans now in their 50s and 60s, it is the warmest memory of children's television they have.
It's Schoolhouse Rocky, the chip off the block of your favorite Schoolhouse.
It was not originally a television show. It was an advertising idea. David McCall, president of the New York advertising agency McCaffrey & McCall, was on a dude ranch vacation when he noticed his 11-year-old son could not memorize the multiplication tables, but could sing every word of every Rolling Stones song on the radio. McCall went back to his office and asked his creative team to write the times tables as rock music. The agency hired a jazz pianist named Bob DeRoe. The first song he wrote was 3 is a Magic Number.
3 is a magic number. Yes, it is.
McCall's creative director, Tom Yohe, drew the animation himself. The agency produced the cartoons in-house and sold them to ABC. ABC happened to be McCaffrey & McCall's single biggest advertising client. There is a particular irony to that. The most lovingly remembered educational programming in American childhood, Conjunction Junction, I'm Just a Bill, 3 is a Magic Number, was conceived by an ad executive, produced by his ad agency, and sold to his agency's biggest customer. The wholesome part of Saturday morning was a side project at the same office that made TV commercials for everything else. They cut the deaths out of a cartoon and built a robot to cover the holes. In 1978, a producer named Sandy Frank bought the American rights to a Japanese anime called Science Ninja Team Gatchaman, hoping to ride the wave of Star Wars. He renamed it Battle of the Planets, and it became a Saturday morning staple. There was a problem. The original Gatchaman was genuinely violent. Characters died, civilians died, cities burned. None of that could air on American children's television, so the adaptation cut it out. Scene after scene of death and destruction, gone. But the cuts left each episode running short, several minutes under what syndication required. So the American producers invented something that did not exist in the original show at all. A chirpy, friendly robot named 7-Zark-7, who chattered to the audience and narrated cheerful explanations of what was happening off screen. His real job was to fill the empty minutes left behind by the violence they had removed, and to paper over the gaps where people used to die. A generation of American kids grew up loving a goofy little robot. They never knew he was a tombstone, a character built for no reason except to stand in front of the bodies and keep them from being seen. There was only one female Smurf, and an enemy made her from scratch. The Smurfs premiered on NBC's Saturday morning lineup on September 12, 1981, and ran for 9 seasons. It was based on a Belgian comic strip by an artist named Peyo from 1958, a village of small blue creatures, all male, with one named Papa Smurf in charge. For the first 8 years of the comic, there were no female Smurfs at all. Then in 1966, Peyo introduced one. And the way she came into the village is a story nobody cleaned up before NBC put her on television. Smurfette was not born a Smurf. In the original comic, she was created in a laboratory by the evil wizard Gargamel, built from clay, brought to life with a spell that included crocodile tears and lies, and sent into the village to seduce the male Smurfs and destroy them from within. She nearly succeeded. The community almost tore itself apart fighting over her. Then Papa Smurf used his own magic on her. He turned her black hair blonde. He remade her face. He changed her dress. He made her, in the words of the comic, a real Smurf. Kind, gentle, beautiful, and easy to like. She was the only female character in the village for the next 19 years. The hero of the show couldn't solve a single case. Inspector Gadget premiered in syndication on September 12, 1983. A bumbling cyborg detective with extending arms, helicopter hats, and roller skates built into his shoes. His niece, Penny, was a quiet little girl who liked computers. His dog, Brain, did whatever Penny told him to do. Watch the show as an adult, with an adult's attention, and you will notice something. Inspector Gadget never solves the case. Not once. In every single episode, he stumbles into the bad guys, fails to recognize them, gets close to dying, and gets out alive only because Penny and the dog have done the actual detective work behind his back the entire time. He takes the credit. He believes he earned it. The kids and the dog let him. For a generation of children, this read as a comedy. As an adult, it reads as something else. The supposed hero of the show was an incompetent man in a position of authority, getting medals and praise for work other people were quietly doing for him. The real detective was a little girl who never spoke up. Inspector Gadget was one of the most quietly subversive cartoons ever aimed at American children. Nobody pointed it out at the time because it was funny. The lesson at the end was a cover for the 22 minutes in the middle. In 1983, Mattel and the animation studio Filmation produced a cartoon called He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. It changed children's television in America forever. Not because it was a great show, but because it was a perfect commercial. Mattel had already released the toys. The cartoon was built around the toys, not the other way around. Each episode introduced new characters, new vehicles, and new weapons that conveniently appeared on store shelves the same week. By the time it ended in 1985, He-Man had run 130 episodes, a daily syndicated half-hour toy catalog. There was one detail tacked on. Every episode closed with He-Man stepping out of the story and speaking directly to the children watching. He would teach them a small lesson. Don't lie to your parents. Help people who are hurt. Listen to your teachers. The lessons were warm, brief, and useful. They were also the cover. As long as a 22-minute toy commercial ended with the hero telling kids to be good people, no one in 1983 could quite call it what it was. By 1986, every other studio in the business was copying the model, and within a decade, every children's show on Saturday morning was, underneath the surface, an ad for something on a store shelf. America had a cartoon to teach children how to go to war. G.I. Joe, a real American hero, ran in syndication from 1985 to 1986. 95 episodes, produced by Sunbow Productions and Marvel Productions, built entirely on top of Hasbro's massive toy line. The opening narration laid out the premise without flinching. G.I. Joe, the narrator said, was America's daring, highly trained special mission force to defend human freedom against Cobra, a ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule the world. This was a children's show describing a fictional American military operation. The villains were terrorists. The heroes were soldiers. The setting was Cold War America in cartoon form, aimed at small boys in the middle of the Reagan defense buildup. At the end of every episode, one of the Joes would step forward and speak directly to a child viewer about safety, kindness, or honesty. The PS always closed with the same line, "And knowing is half the battle." Sunbow brought in a Harvard professor of education to oversee the messages. The PS were warm, they were kind, they had nothing to do with the rest of the show. Hasbro paid for a half hour of children's television in which the toy soldiers fought terrorism. The Harvard-vetted moral at the end was the cover charge. A toy company killed its own hero on purpose. On August 8, 1986, Transformers the movie opened in theaters, and the children who showed up to see their favorite cartoon watched their heroes get slaughtered. Within the first act, a swath of the beloved Autobots were killed off. And then, in the scene that scarred a generation, the leader and father figure of the entire franchise, Optimus Prime, died on screen. It was not an accident, and it was not a creative risk taken lightly. It was a business decision. Transformers was produced by the toy company Hasbro, and the point of killing the old characters was to clear them off store shelves and make room for new, more expensive toys. The film's screenwriter, Ron Friedman, understood the danger. He warned Hasbro that you could not simply remove the father from the family, that young children needed that anchor. Hasbro told him no. They had, in his words, great things planned, which meant new figures to sell. The plan worked at the register and failed everywhere else. The backlash from devastated kids and furious parents was so intense that when Hasbro made G.I. Joe the movie next and had planned to kill off its own lead character, Duke, they lost their nerve. At the last minute, they rewrote his death as a coma instead. The children sobbing in theaters in the summer of 1986 did not understand what they were really watching. They were watching a quarterly sales strategy, animated in full color with a body count. While the boys got soldiers, the girls got toys to love Saturday morning in the 1980s was a war for boys' attention. He-Man fought Skeletor, the Autobots fought the Decepticons, G.I. Joe fought Cobra. Combat, combat, combat. The other half of the audience was not forgotten. They were just sold a different product. Care Bears began as a line of greeting cards drawn for American greetings in 1981, then licensed to Kenner as a toy line, then turned into TV specials in 1983 and a full series in 1985. My Little Pony followed the same path. Hasbro launched the toy in 1982, then specials, then a cartoon in 1986. Both shows were sold by the same machine that sold He-Man and Transformers. The only difference was the product on the shelf. Where the boy shows had villains, weapons, and quarterly toy massacres, the girl shows had feelings, friendship, and pastel colors. The marketing departments had decided that little girls would not buy a fighter. They would buy a heart-shaped friend. So the cartoon they made for girls was a half hour of friendship with a pastel toy attached. Two halves of an audience, two completely different sales pitches. Both sides got a cartoon, both sides got the bill. A billionaire used a cartoon to raise other people's children. Captain Planet and the Planeteers premiered on Ted Turner's TBS in September 1990. Turner, the billionaire who owned the channel, had co-created the show himself. He had hired a producer named Barbara Pyle a decade earlier with one job: find a way to make environmental issues entertaining for children. One day, he turned to her and said the words, "Captain Planet." She asked him who that was. He told her it was her problem to figure out. What she built was unusual for a children's cartoon. 5 teenagers, each from a different continent, summoning a blue-skinned superhero by combining the powers of earth, wind, water, fire, and heart. Episode after episode came at children with the same message: recycle, conserve, do not trust the men polluting your rivers. The villains were almost always the same: a small handful of cartoonishly greedy industrialists in suits ruining the planet for an extra dollar. A 6-year-old watching at home was being asked to identify the enemies of the Earth a full decade before they would be allowed to vote. The show was sincere. It was one of the most expensive pieces of political messaging ever aimed at American children, paid for entirely by one of the richest men in the country. 2 cartoons showed up with almost the same name in the same week. In September 1986, 2 animated shows about ghost hunting teams premiered within 5 days of each other. One was called Ghostbusters. The other was called The Real Ghostbusters. Both came from the title of one of the biggest movies of the 1980s. Both featured a similar premise. Both wanted the same children, and both were calling themselves the legitimate version. The mess had been building for over a decade. In 1975, an animation studio called Filmation had made a forgotten live-action Saturday morning show titled The Ghostbusters. In 1984, Columbia Pictures made the Bill Murray movie, and only afterward realized Filmation owned the name. Columbia paid Filmation $500,000 plus a percentage of the movie's profits. The movie grossed nearly $300 million and on paper never turned a profit. Filmation got the $500,000 and nothing else. So in 1986, both companies turned around and made cartoons. Columbia named theirs The Real Ghostbusters, specifically to declare that the other one was not. Filmation's version lasted 65 episodes. Columbia's lasted 7 seasons. The studio that had owned the name was buried by the studio that had bought it for a price they never had to honor. Britain was afraid of the word ninja. In the United States, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was one of the biggest things on Saturday morning. In Britain, the cartoon ran into a wall of fear. When the series debuted on the BBC in January 1990, the United Kingdom was in the middle of a moral panic over martial arts weapons and violence aimed at children. The word ninja was considered too dangerous to say to kids, so the British rewrote it. The show was renamed Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. The theme song was re-edited to strip out every reference to ninjas, and throughout the episode, censors removed the word ninja wherever it appeared. That was not the end of it. Michelangelo's signature weapon, a pair of nunchucks, was scrubbed from the show, blurred, cut, or swapped out for a harmless grappling hook. The censorship was so total that when the second live-action film came out, a scene where Michelangelo waved a string of sausages around like fake nunchucks as a joke was cut too. A pretend weapon made of breakfast meat was deemed too dangerous to show a child. An entire country looked at a cartoon about pizza-eating turtles and decided it had to rewrite the name millions of children already knew by heart, out of genuine fear of what a plastic toy might do in their hands. An entire American show was stitched together from footage of a different country's Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Premiered on Fox Kids on August 28, 1993. It became the biggest children's franchise in the world almost overnight. The toys sold in numbers nobody in the industry had ever seen. It was not technically made in America. Producer Haim Saban had bought the rights to an obscure Japanese tokusatsu series called Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger. Every action scene, every battle in costume, every giant robot fight in Power Rangers was footage lifted directly from the Japanese show. Saban only filmed the American teen actors out of costume, then stitched the two halves together with English dubbing. Half the show was Japan, the other half pretended it wasn't. There was a problem nobody noticed at first. The producers cast an Asian American actress, Thuy Trang, as the Yellow Ranger, and a black actor, Walter Jones, as the Black Ranger. The colors of the suits had not been chosen with the casting in mind. By the time anyone realized how the racial coincidence looked on screen, the show was already on the air. Trang, Jones, and lead actor Austin St. John walked off the show in 1994 over pay, after 80 episodes of brutally long workdays. Trang never made another television series. She died in a car accident in 2001. She was 27. One cartoon aired one time, then was locked away for telling the truth. Tiny Toon Adventures was, for the most part, a bright and silly show about the next generation of Looney Tunes. Then, in 1991, it aired a segment called One Beer. In it, Buster Bunny finds a single beer in the fridge and pressures his friends Plucky and Hampton into drinking it. Buster even turns to the camera and announces, with a flash of little devil horns, that this is the episode where they show the evils of alcohol. From one beer, the three of them are instantly drunk, stubbled, slurring, dressed like vagrants. They steal a parked police car, lead the cops on a chase, and drive straight off a cliff. The car lands on top of a cemetery, and the spirits of all three children float up to heaven. It was meant as an anti-drinking message, played as broad satire. The network decided children could not handle it. One Beer aired one single time before it was pulled from the Fox Kids lineup and effectively banned from rerun. The show set out to warn kids about something real, killed off its three lovable stars to make the point, and was buried for being too honest about where it was going. The lesson survived. The episode did not. A single cartoon sent hundreds of children to the hospital in one night. On December 16, 1997, a Tuesday evening, Japan's TV Tokyo aired the 38th episode of the children's anime Pokémon. The show was already a global phenomenon. Roughly 4 million people were watching that night. About 20 minutes into the episode, the character Pikachu unleashed an electric attack on a swarm of virtual missiles. The animators rendered the explosion as a barrage of red and blue lights, flickering several times per second. The flicker lasted 4 seconds. Within minutes, children all over Japan began to seize. By the end of the night, 685 of them had been rushed to hospitals. 310 boys, 375 girls. Some were admitted to intensive care. The Japanese press called it Pokémon shock. Nintendo's stock fell. The series was pulled off the air for months. That episode has never been broadcast again. Not in Japan, not in any other country, not in any edited form. It exists in archives. It is locked away. The most popular children's franchise on Earth produced a single episode so dangerous it has to be hidden forever. The cartoon made to stop a moral panic got devoured by one. In 1983, Dungeons & Dragons was the most popular role-playing game in America, and it was under attack. So its creators tried something strange to calm the storm, a Saturday morning cartoon. The Dungeons & Dragons animated series ran on CBS from 1983 to 1985, 27 episodes, a collaboration between Marvel Productions, the game's publisher TSR, and Japan's Toei Animation. The idea was to soften the game's frightening reputation by handing it to children. The reputation was the problem. After a teenager's death in 1982, his grieving mother blamed the game and founded an organization called Bothered About Dungeons & Dragons, or BADD, in 1983. She campaigned through churches and national media, even appearing on 60 Minutes opposite the game's co-creator. The National Coalition on Television Violence demanded the cartoon air with a warning that Dungeons & Dragons had been linked to real-life violent deaths. A children's cartoon swept into a full-blown culture war. The show itself was unusually dark for the era. 6 kids pulled through a portal at an amusement park into a brutal fantasy world, trying desperately to find their way home, week after week. And then it was canceled, abruptly, midway through its 3rd season. There was no finale. The fate of the 6 children was simply left hanging. A final episode titled Requiem was written but never produced, so it never aired. The kids never got home. A cartoon created to calm a panic about children being lost to a dark fantasy world ended fittingly with its own children lost in a dark fantasy world. Forever.